Hello, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do a notepad tutorial. This has been long requested here on my channel. I already have a full step-by-step tutorial of how I do my notebooks. I also have a step-by-step tutorial of how I do my notepads, but I filmed it already more than 2 years ago, so it's a little outdated. Since then I've improved some techniques and how I make them, so I thought I could share the knowledge with you and show you how I do my notepads right now. I'm going to try that this video will be as complete as I can. But if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them, and all the materials will be linked in the description for you to check them out. So let's get into the materials. This is the thing that I have most questions about, like what printer do I use, how I print them, what glue do I use, what paper do I use. So I'm going to share everything with you. Just a little disclaimer that the materials that I use now, I have been buying them over time. It's not the ones that I've been using since the beginning. If you want to see a video of how I made them before getting the guillotine and all of that, if you want to check that out, I'm going to leave it in the description. But also check this video because some of the things that I do right now are a little bit better of the process that I used back then. Yeah, let's talk about paper. The paper that I use for my notepads, it's by Navigator and I use 90 GSM paper, but you can use any type of paper that you want. You can use thicker paper. It really depends on what you want to do and how you want your final notepads to look like. I normally print on A3 paper. Sometimes I use A4 paper. It really depends on the stock of paper that I can find. It really depends on how much the one specific design sells. If it doesn't sell that much, I might restock it in an A4 because it's not worth to restock as many at the time. For the backings of the notepads, I use 250 GSM paper, but you can use other type of cardstocks. But my backing cards basically act as one extra sheet of paper because I print on them, but also to make the notepad a little bit sturdier. To basically make them a reality, I print them myself. I use my Canon Pixma IX6850. I can print in A3. This printer supports A3 borderless and A4 borderless. Printing takes a while, so that's why I have two. So yeah, really love the printer and I can't recommend it enough. A little quick tip: if you don't have a printer, you can afford it right now, don't worry. I didn't have any printers when I started to do notepads. What I did, it's a little trick, I guess. I went to printing houses websites, and when you get to the websites, go to the page where you can print flyers. That's how I printed the first notepads that I did, and then when they arrive, they are already cut to size that it's the part that takes the longest is the printing and the cutting, and then you just have to glue them. So little tip for you. And for cutting the notepads, I use my big guillotine. It's what makes it all possible to do the amount of notepads that I do. It's like kind of an industrial guillotine, but not really. I got it on Amazon. I got it already 3 years ago, and at the time it cost me around 80 euros. They are quite pricey right now. I think I got them in the right time. Try to see all about that, but I really love it. But please, a disclaimer here: be careful if you buy a guillotine like this. I've seen people sending me messages on Instagram saying that they had some accidents while using it. It cuts really well, so please be careful. Don't use it with your hair down if you have long hair. Be extra mindful when using it because it can really cut. The last step is the mounting of the notepads, where I put them all together. I glue them on top, and for that I just use cheap brushes that I found in like dollar stores and stuff like that. I use white glue. It's like PVA glue, like Mod Podge type of glue. It's the best one to use because it's flexible. It doesn't glue so much that the glue gets rigid. And to put them all together so they don't get out of place while I'm gluing that, I used to use a press. That's what I showed on the video that I mentioned before. Right now I use clamps and just some wood. It's just like cutting boards on the kitchen section of your local shop. That's where I got them. It's super cheap and I just put them in there and I put the clamps. I'll show you everything, all the process, and explain everything. And that is all the materials that I use. Let me show you how I prepare the files, how I mount them, and how I send them to print. Regarding the design of the notepad itself, I'm an illustrator, so I do my own notepads. Let me show you how I create them. The tool that I use, it's an iPad, and I use an app called Procreate that it's only available for iPads, and I use the Apple Pencil to draw on the screen itself. And as you can see, I have some of the notepad designs in here, amongst other things like my sticker sheets and all of that. This is one of the notepad designs that I have right now, and this one, I have them in several sizes. After finishing the design, I just save them as a PNG and I export them to my computer. Okay, so for the mounting of the files, I use Photoshop on my computer. I like to do them here and not on the iPad, because if you don't use Procreate, when you resize an image there, it can affect the quality of the printing. And over time I realized that printing through Photoshop, the quality, it's a lot better and it's a lot easier to change the settings and get the colors that you want. So yeah, that's why I use it. File over here ready for A3, and I have another one for A4, so let me put the same file. So as you can see, this one, it's for printing in A3, and this one is for printing in A4. Only I want my square notepads to have around 9.5 centimeters, between 9 and 9.5. One thing you have to keep in mind is that you have to add a bleed to your illustration, because when you cut on the big guillotine, you'll have to put the cut a little bit on the inside of the paper, like so you don't get any white margins or anything like that. So just keep in mind that you have something important that you don't want to be cut. Put it more in the inside of the paper and not so close to the margins. So I have the files basically divided by layers like this, so I can just turn them off and on. So when I want to print, I just go to print, and this is the settings that I have. I'm going to leave in the description a studio vlog where I show you my settings that I used before when I had a PC. When I changed to my MacBook, I realized that I also had to change my printing settings. So right here on color handling, I select printer, manages colors, and let's go to the print setting. So as you can see over here, I already have several printing settings. For quality and media, I use photo paper matte because I use matte paper, and I use in high quality. And this is the settings that I have for my colors. For the colors that I use and the ink that I use and all of that, these are the ones that work for me. But yeah, I thought I might show you. If you get a printer like mine, you might want to try these settings and see if it matches your colors or not. And that's basically it for the printing. I just click save and then I click print. It's a few hours later and these are finally printed. Something that it takes usually a long time to print because I print with high quality and I add 40 pages on my notepads. So before I used to print just several pages and then I would cut them and mount them together and then do the 40 pages block. What I do now, it's I print 40 pages of each design, and then I also print the backing. You can tell, but this is the backing. It's a thicker paper. So basically when I cut them, thing of this one, each print will already be one full notepad because I cut them like this. So all the 40 pages will be like this, and then when I cut them, it's a lot easier to mount because I can just stack them. So yeah, let me show you how I cut them. For cutting, you're going to need a ruler. The guillotine, it's really cool, but sometimes it's really hard to see where you want to cut. So what I do is I try to measure it, so then I can put on the ruler on the guillotine. It will be a lot easier and more precise. So the first cut that I want to do, it's going to be on the inside of the bottom notepad. So let's measure it. Let me take this out so it'll be easier for you to see. I'm just going to try to put the 0 on the margin here. So I want to cut a little bit on the inside here so that I don't see any white margin on this page or on the pages below. So right now I have, if I cut it to like the exact margin here, it will be 14.5 centimeters, but I want to cut a little bit on the inside, so I'm going to cut 14.4. So this is the bleed that I mentioned before. I always cut a little bit on the inside just for safe, so I don't have to cut it more times. This way I know the first cut will be okay and without any white margins, and that's why it's so important to add a little bit of bleed all over around, so you don't cut any main subjects on the notepad. Now that I know I want to cut at 14.4, I'm going to go here, and this is the thing on the guillotine that basically fixes the paper on a certain measure. As you can see, I have a ruler over here, so I'm going to place this part on 14.4. You have measurements down below and up, and they have to match, otherwise when you put the notepad or the notebook or wherever you're going to cut, they are going to get crooked. So you have to be careful for it to have the same measure here and here, just to make sure it's straight when you put the paper in, because this is what it's going to be the thing that puts the paper straight and in place. So now that I have it in place, what I like to do, this is basically the most important thing that you have for the notepad to be to have a straight cut. So it's really important for this to be tight really well. And once I move place, I push it to that side so it'll be on the same place that it won't move, and then I tighten it really well. This is the part that tightens, and then when I'm tying, I'm going to check if it moves places, and as you can see now, it won't move no matter how much strength I put in here, because basically when you put the paper will crash in here and it can move if it's not tight enough. So that part, it's done. Now we add the paper. I apply some strength in here just to make sure that no sheet it's out of place. It's a really good machine, but you have to keep in mind it's not perfect, and even though it's a big machine and you can cut a lot of sheets, it's not like one of those industrial ones, more automatic and all of that. It's still a manual machine, so you have to learn how to make it better, and your cuts and all of that. What I find that helps, it's to cut the notepads more on the upper side of the guillotine and less on this side here, because when you put the blade down, it gets a little bit crooked as it reaches more on this side. Another thing that you can do, it's tight and unscrew the screws and try the blade to see if it helps, if you are getting some crooked cuts, and also check this red part as well. When this sulk here gets too deep, it can eat the paper on the last page, so you have to keep that in mind. You can turn on the machine very carefully, of course, and there's 2 screws down below, and if you unscrew them and you take this piece over here, you can rotate it. I think that is all I can say about that, and I hope it helps. So let's give it a cut. Okay, paper is in, no sheets out of place, handle it's secure, and now we are going to rotate this lever, sorry for the noise, and we are going to tied it as well, and this is also important to be tied so that the paper doesn't move place. You'll have to find the perfect strength of this lever, because if it is too tight sometimes the paper can cut a little bit on a diagonal, so that's important as well. So this is tight but not too tight, and we are going to touch on this lever here. This is the security lever that makes me do this. If this is not down, I can't push it down. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to cut, and you have to apply a little bit of strength in here. When I finish cutting, I always make sure that I do this to see if the lever is secure until I put my hands on the guillotine to take out the paper. To be really careful. I can take this one, I can put the lever up, and I can take this one as well. What I do is I put a hand on this side over here, I push it outward, and this way I don't put my hand too close to the blade. If I do this, it's really like you can have an itch or something and you have that thing of putting your hand up. I now have this one and this one over here, and I'm going to continue to do the same. Basically, I'll take the measures of where I want to cut it until I run out of any margins that I have. This design, it's all cut. Once I start to cut them without any margins, I do this on all the sides just to make sure that any sheet was left with like a white margin or any piece, so they all look okay. And now I can stack them, and I'll explain why. And this is the reason why I love the backing card so much. So basically I can stack them, and I know they are going to have 40 sheets and I could glue them all together. I didn't used to do that, but now I do. Since I use the backing cards, they'll be divided. When I glue them all together, I can then unglue them very easily without having to count the sheets or anything, because they'll be divided by the backing card. Let's cut all of these. I'm going to go to the A3 paper, and I wanted to give you some advice on cutting these ones on a guillotine like this. The bigger the paper that goes from this side to this side, the bigger the possibility that the cut will be a little bit out of place. I think it's because the blade touch this side first, then this one, so that might happen. So the first thing that I do for A3 is I just cut them in half, and then after that it's like cutting A4 sheets. I could imagine that. they are all cut, so it's time to glue them and mount them together. So to glue them, I use two techniques. The first one is with a press. I built this one myself. I just went to like a shop where you can buy wood. I got a plank of wood and I cut it in half, and then I did the holes and I added this kind of things in here so you can tie them up. I don't really use this technique anymore because it's really tricky to add the notepads into the press and to keep them in place to glue. But you can check how I do it on the other tutorial that I mentioned. How I do it right now, it's basically with 2 blocks of wood and some clamps. I think it's clamps. Basically, I got these ones on like a local shop. These were super cheap. These were sold as cutting boards for like kitchen. I got these ones. Basically, this is really cool and a little bit better than with a press, because the bigger the clamp that you have, the more notepads that you can glue at a time. So yeah, really like that, and I'm glad that I tried that out because it really works for me. It might not work for everyone, but I'll show you how I do it. Okay, I have my wood in here and I'm going to use this table. I'm going to put the bottom one in here and I'm going to leave a little bit of like 1 or 2 centimeters between the table and where the wood stops, the wood begins, so that I have space to put my clamps. Please keep in mind this technique, it's a little bit to practice a little bit until you reach the point that you can put the notepads a lot easier in here, especially because of these ones that you have to do this and all of that and tie them up. So yeah, please keep that in mind. The first 1 or 2 tries that you try this one, it might be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to grab my notepads. I'll be tapping them on the table on the upper side because I want this side to be as straight as possible without any lumps, that you pass your finger and it's like smooth. And I'm going to, when I tap them like this, I have to hold them in place like this so they don't move, and I'm going to apply it on the wood. When I apply it, I'm going to leave just a little tiny bit between the beginning of the wood. This is just for me when I add the glue. I don't glue the paper to the wood, so I left just like maybe 2 millimeters between the wood and the paper. So I did the same with this ones, and now I'm going to grab the top one. I'm going to put it on top and I'm going to try not to move it, like I'm going to place it really slowly so that the paper doesn't move. Again, I'm going to leave just a little bit between the wood and here. I'm going to keep my hand in here, putting some pressure so that they don't move, and I'm going to grab my first clamp, and with my hand still on top, I'm going to hold this part here while my hand it's still putting some strength in here so that the notepads don't move. I'm going to grab this one while I tighten the clamps a little. Don't apply too much pressure on the first one or the wood will start to lift up on this side. So I'm going to add the other one. It's kind of secure, so I'm going to move my hand to this one. Now I can tie them up. The closer you can get the notepads to the wood in here, the better, because it will apply a lot more pressure to it. As you can see, move at all, and this is what we want. Otherwise, the thing is, when the paper is not too tight together, it'll create some spaces between the sheets of paper, and then the glue can enter those sheets, and then when you rip off the sheets of paper, it will rip off the sheets below, so we don't want that. We just want the glue to be on the surface. I have my glue and my brush here. I just use a big brush so I can put all over the notepads at the same time, especially when I glue like a bunch of them at the same time. It really helps to be faster, so let's apply the glue. Okay, I'm not going to apply too much glue. The secret here is to apply layer by layer, and be careful to not to put glue on top of the notepads, otherwise they will stay there. So I just normally go around with my finger and I try to take the glue. If you got glue on the side, I also go with my finger and it's fine. To make it smooth, I also go with my finger. And again, you want some thin layers and not to apply too much glue all at once. And if you also apply too much at the same time, the paper starts to bend. I wait a little bit after applying each layer until it's a little tacky or even dry, and then I apply some more, and I apply more or less maybe 3 to 4 layers. So yeah, that's what we are going to do on these ones and on the rest of the notepads. Dry now, and I always wait for them to dry when taking them out, because when they are not dry they are still a little flimsy and they can be taken apart very easily. So it's always better to wait for them to dry completely so you can take them out a lot safely. Here they are, big chunky ones. I'm going to glue all the other ones and then I'll show you how I separate them. I use an X-Acto knife. It doesn't have to be a good one. So as I said before, they are kind of already separated. I don't have to count the sheets because they are divided by the thick backing cards. So I already know where they are divided, you know. And I'm going to separate them. I'm going to try to the sheet below, and I'm going to pass the X-Acto knife, and this has to be really slowly and trying not to touch the sheet, trying to only touch where the glue is sitting, like between this. And I'm not applying any strength, I'm just passing the X-Acto knife little by little, and that is it. We have a notepad. I'm going to do the same here for you to see. I'm just trying to find the backing cards. I'm going to open it. As you can see, you can already see like fine line in here where they are together. So you can just rip them off, but sometimes the glue comes off a little too harsh and it takes out the glue from below. So I like to do it with the X-Acto knife. You can see it's really smooth and it doesn't cause anything in here. The thing is, when you put too much glue, it can be a lot of glue in here, and sometimes when you do this it can rip off the top of the sheet below. So that's why I apply the glue layer by layer and little by little, so they look cute and not ruined. Again, don't apply any strength to the X-Acto knife, just cut it little by little. If you find the notepads are too tight and you can't really see the line here, it helps if you put your finger here, push this notepad up a little bit for you to have a little bit more of a margin between the two. We reached the end of the tutorial now. I really hope this was not only nice to watch, but that you learned something from it. And now that you can make the notepads yourself, it is for your personal use or for your business. I really hope this video helped you out. Again, if you have any questions or things that I forgot or didn't mention on this video, please leave them down below in the comments. I love to chat with you. All the materials that I use are in the description of the video if you want to check that out. They are affiliate links, so you can check all the materials that I use on this video. Again, I'm going to leave a link in the description for the previous notepad tutorial that I did, where I mentioned a little bit more how I did my notepads before getting the big guillotine and all of that, and if you don't have a press, how to glue them. So yeah, hope that helps as well. If you want to check my shop or my notepads, the link is in the description, as well as my Instagram and all of those things. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys on the next video. Bye! Bye!